Hello, welcome to the Demystifying Blender Add-ons workshop. My name is Spencer Magnusson. I am currently a pipeline engineer at DreamWorks, but I've been a Blender enthusiast for over 15 years and have been making add-ons since 2018. For the general flow of what I'm going to be doing today, I'm going to be setting up my code space and registering an add-on. And I will be showing how you can reload your changes so you can get live updates as you're coding your add-on. Next, I'll be adding a panel and simple operator and showing how you can use even Blender's UI source code directly into your own add-on. Also, the system console that Blender has and its info panel and Python console, in short, of just all the ways that Blender offers to help with debugging, and then of how to find answers. What I mean by how to find answers is of how to go through the documentation, how to search, which I think is just as important in terms of finding answers as how to ask the right questions within a search engine ecosystem that we have today with the internet. So let's get started. All right, let's get into setting up the code space. So I'm just going to load up Blender. This is Blender 4.1.1, so the most recent one that's available. And so for setting up your code space, now you can make your scripts within Blender. So if you go up here, let me make this a little bigger. Excuse that. Not 12, 2. There we go. That should be big enough. All right. Anyway, so at the top there's these tabs, the different workspaces. We're going to be looking at the scripting one the most today. So you can use the script editor, which is right here. You can also just swap any of these just with this little drop down, so the text editor. You can just go in here, click new, and then you can start. It's going to be interesting typing because I have to hold my microphone, so I apologize. But you can just type your code in here. You can import and everything. The reason we won't do that today is that for add-ons, there is a persistence to it, and with the text editor, it saves it to a file and not to Blender in general. You can use this for your own testing, and I use this a lot for just like proof of concepts. If I just want to write a quick script to see if something works, I usually just throw it into the text editor. But in this case, we want to make a legitimate add-on. So I was setting up the workspace. Instead of going into the actual add-on folder, you can actually tell it what folder to use. So if I go down here into the preferences, edit preferences, and file paths, there is the script directories. And so you can just add a script directory and you can select the folder that you want. In this case, so I already have one. Let's go there really quick. This is the folder that I gave it, and you can just create your own subfolder, which is what I did for Blender scripts. Now, you'll notice that there's actually a subfolder for add-ons. And the reason is that because script directories can actually hold a few things. One of them is add-ons. And so in this case, you need to make a subfolder within the folder you give it. So this is just Blender scripts, and then Blender scripts, add-ons, lowercase, one word. You click there, then this is all of the add-ons that I have in here. So you can do multi-file add-ons with folders. We're just going to be doing single file add-ons right now, just because it's easier to set up for the time of the workshop. I want to keep it short. So we'll do a new file in here. Let's see, let's do econla.py. Now Python files, the file extension is .py. So yes, I do want to set that. So we're going to open it. We're going to open it in whatever text editor you want. This is a text editor, code editor agnostic tutorial. I don't want this to be, you have to use Visual Studio Code, you have to use PyCharm, you have to use Notepad. I don't care about the text editor. Do whatever you're comfortable with, because what we're going to be doing today should be regardless. As long as it supports coding in Python, that should be fine. Okay, that should be good. All right. bpy is the Python package for Blender that has all the Blender data behind it that you want to access in your scripts. So that's just kind of what I put there. But For many of you, you may be very new to programming and even to Python perhaps. And so I want this to be, regardless of your skill in that area, I want this to be as straightforward and not as focused in the just learning Python as much as just getting started with creating add-ons regardless of your skill set in there. You may be wondering, okay, now I have this Python file, how can I make it an add-on? So Blender actually offers many templates of add-ons and other scripts. So if you go up to the scripting workspace in the text editor at the top, the menu has templates. You go to Python, and there's lots of different templates, a lot of ones that I use usually for starters, like with operators, making modals, making UI panels and menus and things like that. The one we'll be going with for this is the add-on, the very top. Now, so there is this little dictionary, is the Python term, that's called BL-info. And this actually tells Blender all the main information that it needs to know about your add-on in terms of what it is, what version it supports, what version of the add-on it is. So we're going to copy and paste it. So you can just do Control-C. I am right-clicking to get to copy. We're just going to clear this and paste. So let's see, what do we want to name it? Let's do, again, this is going to be very interesting with my typing. All right. I'll just put you, because you are the developer here. But yeah, you can customize all these parameters. So version is the version of your add-on. So as you make updates to your add-on, you'd be changing this version to match. And you can do 2. You can also do 3 numbers. So you can do a major, minor, patch for those that are familiar with it. But you would be incrementing this over time. Then this is the Blender version that the minimum Blender version that your add-on supports. So in this case, this is 2.8, which is pretty old. Wow, I feel old. Okay, so and then location is usually, actually, let's look at actual add-ons. So without preferences. So the description. So the description matches this description. The location is usually to tell users of where they can expect your add-on to show up in the user interface. So you can say like in the 3D view, the add menu, and then there's submenu mesh, and then the operator new object. Author, of course, the version, which would match this one. And yeah, and then the category. So this is the category up here. So 3D view, and in this case, this is add mesh. So that's if you more just like categorizing and organizing within Blender. But yeah, you can use other add-ons as reference if you're wondering. We have our add-on. Make sure I save. I want to make sure I do some debugging here. That was actually something I didn't get to during the conference. So, all right, I'm going to refresh my add-ons up here. Let's see, what's the name? So we have BigCon LA is the name of our add-on. There it is. It shows up. Only from that dictionary. That's all we need to have it show up, which is great. Now you've noticed if I try to enable it, it's saying it can't find register. Now register is how the add-on is enabled and disabled. So in this case, we don't need it to do anything because we're just because there's nothing to register. So this is going to be pretty straightforward. So for this function is named register. So this is saying define a function named register, and then parentheses, which can be used to put parameters, but we don't need any here, and then a colon. So let me just, and then there's a keyword in Python called pass, which just means don't do anything. So that is all we're going to do here, because we don't need to do anything just yet, but we will add some things later. Now if I change this to be you and me, and save it, even if I click refresh up there, okay, so it does do that. Looks like it checks this every time. Interesting. Okay, so let's get into making a panel. With the templates again, we can actually see, let's see what they have. So the gizmos, operators, UI. This this scrolling is very weird sometimes. I'm not sure how I feel about it. All right, UI panel. Now from here, you can see a basic panel that's laid out. Let me copy and paste it first, so that way we can have it showing. I'm gonna copy, go back to our code. Since there's a register and unregister in here, I'm just gonna overwrite those. So basically it's registering our panel with the add-on and then unregistering it afterward. There was a question during the workshop of what's the importance of unregistering. So basically it's the cleanup whenever you disable the add-on. So you want to make sure that when someone disables the add-on that all the panels are gone, all the operators are gone, and any relevant data is cleaned up afterwards. While initially it may not seem like it's necessary, I have seen some add-ons that don't clean up afterwards, and it results in breaking things and even preventing other add-ons from loading as well. So make sure you unregister everything afterwards. Okay, so it's saved. Let's go back up here and reload scripts. So in terms of seeing changes, again with Python, it actually caches the file, so it doesn't actually read it every time as you're making updates. And so if you want to force it to read your file again, in Visual Studio Code, there's a popular extension that actually does this reloading for you. But with Blender, it actually does this internally now. So if you go up to these menus, the icon is actually a menu in of itself. At System, there is this option called Reload Scripts. So this will reload the text editor scripts as well as all of your add-ons. So I'm going to remove that for now, just so it doesn't mess with anything by accident. I don't want it to accidentally reload it. All right, so you can see it now pops up down here. So the layout demo, let's go over what these properties mean, because this determines some of the important properties as well as where it shows up. So we'll show it here. So the space type is referring to what space it shows up in Blender. So the text editor is considered a space by Blender. The Python console is a space. The 3D view is a space. This outliner and this outliner are each their own spaces. They're the same type. They're both outliner spaces, but they're separate. And so that's what the space type is referring to. Region type is of what part of that space it shows up in. This is more important in the 3D view. So for example, this right shelf where a lot of add-ons put their panels, this is the UI region. And then for all these tools, this is the tools section. If you wanted to create a tool, you'd want it to show up there. And so in this case, in the category for the 3D view, the name of your tab is this category. And so there's the create tab, that's the create category. InView has its own, Polygon, and all those other ones. And so then and then context is specific to 3D view, can use it as well, but in this case, it's saying for the properties, what properties it is. So properties space is right here. The region is the window, so that space is just referring to this main area. And context scene, it's the scene properties right there. So it won't show up in any of the other property tabs. And of course the label is this label right here. So the ID name is basically how Blender finds it. And so there is a specific naming convention. In this case, the PT is representing panel, and then this is just whatever name you want, and then scene is like the category it's in. So let's actually get into documentation then. So maybe you want to learn more about these attributes. So you could actually go into here, so the docs.blender.org. If you go here, there's a few quick shortcuts. There's the user manual, which is more of non-developer documentation. So let me just pop that up. So if you want to just like understand in general how things like grease pencil works, or the rendering or compositing, understanding the actual settings, this is a great resource. I use this all the time when I'm answering questions for other people because it's an easy place to get all your answers. Developer docs is usually like if you're like developing your own version of Blender, so you're like actually going to the Blender source code and changing it there. This is where you'd go for that. And the Python API is what we want, specific to Python and add-ons. So let's say we wanted to learn more about the panel. So for the documentation, a good way to search is to just use the Python name for it. In this case, for the panel, it's bpy types panel with periods in between. So if I search that, go search through, there it is at the top. I really like this UI, by the way. They changed it recently for the new version. I really like it. So it scrolled down automatically for me to the actual class definition. So you can see things like BL category, the category in which the panel would be displayed, context. And again, there's some to-dos and some things to be filled out. That's okay. That is something to be expected sometimes with the documentation, is that it is a work in progress. It's open source, and with things so constantly changing between Blender versions, it can be hard for the documentation to keep up. So yeah, and things like options, so you can have the panel closed by default and things like that. So this is an easy way to find answers to questions of what certain properties are, what they mean, and often some of these general ones like panels or operators have examples in the documentation, which is great. But yeah, so that's to understand all this stuff. Let's get into the actual draw function, which is drawing the properties. So with this, the main important functions or subfunctions to call out is label. So in this case, it's just writing text in the panel, and then the prop, which is short for property. So this basically says that in the scene, there's a property called frame start. Display that property. And that's one of the nice things with drawing things with the UI in Blender, is that you don't have to create your own property or try to do all this other setup and just drawing the label and the little arrows to drag or things like that. Like you can just tell it the property, and all that in the property has all the data Blender needs to draw it. And so it's very nice and be able to very self-contained. And then finally, the operator. Operators, let me explain what properties are briefly. Operators are just simply any of the buttons that are considered an operation that usually drastically affects the file, something that you would want to save for usually. So if I delete the default cube, you'll notice in this little info area, this is this info area, it actually has been logging all the different things that I've done. But you can see that it just called a bpy.ops object delete. And I'll undo. And you'll notice the undo doesn't relog it. And you'll notice like navigation or moving around doesn't count as that either. But it's basically anything that you'd want to save for. So in this case, deleting an object would do that. Or even, let's say, moving, like the camera. So you'll notice not only did it say bpy.ops transform translate as the function that it called, but it also gave a bunch of parameters and values. So like the amount that I moved it, the proportional editing if it's on, or this snapping if I used it, which it's all false because I didn't use it. In this case, you can copy it, and you don't want to do this in a panel, but I'm just demonstrating that you can paste it. That from here, then you can be able to replicate that same operation in your code if you wanted to for an operator, which we'll get to later. But yeah, so that is what an operator is. And in the code, this layout operator function just says draw the operator by this name. And so if we wanted it to be delete, let's actually do that. So if we wanted this to be the delete, we would just take everything after the bpy.ops and period, but before the parentheses. So instead of render, it'll be object delete. Now let's save, reload. Okay, so it wasn't the big button. I put it down here. So if I click delete, oh, it did a little confirm as well. That's nice. I didn't know that it did that by default. But now it deleted the camera. Now you notice I didn't have to say in the operator delete the camera. It relies on the context of what I'm selecting. That's what nearly all the Blender operators rely on. It relies on what you have currently selected, what the current scene you're looking at. It doesn't ask you what those things are. It just assumes based on what's open what you've selected. But yeah, so that's how you draw a layout. Now maybe instead of start and end, you want to do, let's say, your render resolution. So you could just try to go to the documentation and find the property name and then paste it in. But there's actually a quicker way to do that. So if I right-click over a field, so if I right-click, there's an option called Copy Full Data Path. If you click that, let's go back up to this top area. It copied the Blender Python path to that given resolution property. Now you're thinking, okay, now I have this, how do I put it in the layout? Let's go to the frame start as a reference so that we have something to compare to. So the property is saying go to the scene and access the attribute named frame start. Now you notice what I copied is this. It's actually referencing the Blender scene by name. In this case, it's actually relying on the context and saying just get to the scene that we're currently looking at and then get its attribute frame start. So that's what that's referring to. So instead of frame start, we want resolution X. With the resolution X, there's actually something after scenes. It's .render, so it's like a little subgroup of properties. So we want to paste that in there. Let me delete those since we don't need it. And save. Let's save first. Go back down. There we go. It has the resolution X. And you'll notice like it updated the label, even added the pixel units as well. So let's say now let's add the resolution Y. Let's go back up. Select Y. Copy full data path. Now you could probably make some assumptions on what it's named. But in this case, I just wanted to. So copy resolution Y, scene.render. There you go. Resolution X and Y right there. There you go. You're able to add your own UI properties. Now let's say you want to not just have these properties, but have it look this way. You don't want it to look different. You want it to look the same so users can feel familiar with it. So there is even a shortcut way to do all that too instead of looking it up. This does actually require a setting change. So let me go up to the Edit Preferences. In the top tab interface, there is a checkbox for developer extras. So you'll just want to check that box. This will also show a new tab, Experimental. That's for if you're testing new features or legacy features in Blender. That'll pop up too. But the important thing is that once you've checked that box and then right-click again over that property, along with these, there's a button that's added called Edit Source. So if I click on Edit Source, it'll pull up the text editor as well if you have it open. And it will not only show the Python UI code, it actually takes you to the line that you went to. So I clicked on resolution X, and that's where it took me. And so this is a really great way of being able to study how the UI is displayed, how Blender creates its UI. So that way you can create something similar and familiar for your users. So If I want to just copy this, I'm going to ignore the frame rate because this has its own function. I don't want to have to copy everything in the class and deal with all that for this example. Let's just we'll paste it here. We'll go up to the render button. Go back. Look at that. Carbon copy. But you're able to use this exact code. And so I found this very useful when I see an existing UI and wonder of how can I integrate that or make my UI look like that. So this is a great way of being able to study that and see how they did that. So yeah, created our first panel. Awesome. There's a few consoles or a few areas that are helpful for specifically for add-ons and scripting. We already went over the info, which logs everything, including operations. The Python console, I love using this for testing and be able to check different things. Oh, I didn't want to do that. Can I clear that? Okay. I accidentally copied the panel. I forgot. I thought I was still copying a property. So if I copy this data path, for instance, and I want to just see what is the value of this property. There it goes, it says 1920. And so this is a good way of being able to test Python statements in here as well. So if I wanted to check if a certain attribute existed or testing specific parameters for an operator, like you could run all that in here. It's naturally importing Blender attributes as well. So this is really a great way to do testing within Blender along with just running your add-on. Well, let's say you have an error and you want to figure out how to solve the error. Let's add an error. I'm just gonna top of draw, just make a bunch of nonsense that Python's gonna be confused with. Reload. Okay, so it's there, but it's actually not able to draw anything. That's because my error's before all the other stuff's being drawn. So it'll actually show up in the info panel, which is great as well. But if you want to see the full logs, you can go up to Window and toggle System Console. I learned during the workshop the hard way that this button actually doesn't exist for Mac users. So I apologize. Hopefully that's something that gets changed. But for Mac users, if you want to do this, you'll actually have to run Blender from a command line, and then you'll be able to see all the logs in that command line interface. But for Windows and Linux, you can be able to click that. And so you'll notice it has the error, where that error is, which file, but it actually tries drawing it multiple times. So that's why you'll see the error come up so many times. So the panel is actually drawn multiple times. So it's like every time your cursor hovers over a field and the little highlights change and things like that, that's a new draw of that given panel. And so every time you do that, the panel reruns. And so when you see multiple errors like that, that's why, for a panel specifically. So System Console, so that's a pop-up window. If you want to remove the pop-up window, you have to just close that. I think closing the window actually closes Blender, so you have to be careful with that. Okay, let's get to the operator. Let's add an operation to Blender, as for some reason it was flipping in my head. But okay, so let's make an operator, kind of like with deleting. So we go to Python, and let's see, what operators does it have? It has quite a few examples of operators, which is great. Let's see. We'll do add a mesh. Well, this creates a box. Oh, that's funny. A little too much. I don't want to have it be too overwhelming. Let's see. We'll just do a simple one. And basically, it calls this function, which is out here. I'm not sure why they separated it. Basically, it prints all the names of prints all the objects in your scene. Actually, it doesn't even print the names of the objects, just the object reference. That's funny. But yeah, let's make a operator. So I'm going to copy that. Alrighty, we'll add it up here. I know this is really big, and for me it's a little cumbersome, but I'd rather make sure you see it without feeling like you have to zoom in or anything. So this operator, the ID name is again how Blender finds it. And then there's the label, which coincides with the label that the button will draw. Oh yeah, we never reloaded. There we go. So render, that's the label for the operator. So in this case, it's simple object operator. The poll method that you'll see here, this basically says like, if this isn't true, then the user shouldn't be able to use the operator. So in this case, it's saying the user has to have a selected active object. If there's not, then they shouldn't be able to use this. Let's try a print statement. So there's a function in Python called print. It basically just lets you just print anything to the console. So we're gonna use context, active object. We'll just do name. So it's the actual name of the object. All right, so we have this operator. Now we need to know, how do we register it? So we need to go down here and paste it. So you have to make sure that we register and unregister it. Now you notice I'm actually going to be registering it before the panel. Now the reason for that is that you want to make sure that the add-on isn't ever in a place where something doesn't exist yet. So in this case, if I'm going to be adding the operator to my panel and I put this afterward, then the panel could start drawing a button for an operator that doesn't even exist yet. So you want to make sure the operators are done before any UI. And when you're unregistering, it's flipped. You want to remove the panel before you remove the operators that it could be showing. So we unregistered and registered it. Let's see, what else? Oh, we need to put it in our panel. What do we want to do? Let's make it the big button. All right, so we go by the ID name. Under simple operator, that is what this is referring to, is what is the operator name for Blender defined. So let's reload. Let me clear all these. The reload scripts can include reloading those text editor stuff, so I want to make sure that that's all cleared and not related. So look, now the big button is now simple object operator. We're selecting the cube as our active object. So select it, object operator. Now we printed, so we have to go to the console. You can see that it says cube down here. Let's do the camera as well. Oh, this is another weird bug with the terminal window, is that sometimes it halts. So if you just press space or enter some other thing, it'll force it to continue. But just know that with the system console up, sometimes this forces Blender to hang a little bit. So if that happens, just like go to this, click in here and press space, and that'll make sure that it goes. But there printed camera as well. So that is our custom operator. So maybe let's have it do a existing operator. Let's have it delete. So we can delete the default cube. So if you want to know, okay, what operation deletes objects? Oh, it's freezing again. All right, let me turn that off just to make sure it doesn't do that again. Okay, so now you see that the info panel, it comes up with the bpy.ops. Let's use that. And so it includes the parameters as well. In this case, we can do, maybe we'll add the confirm parameter. We'll set it to true instead of leaving it false. There we go, and it's gone. I didn't do a confirmation. Oh, yes, I know why I didn't do the confirmation. So this is another, there should be just like a subcategory of all the quirks of add-on development. So with confirm, this is a specific thing with execute, is that with the execute function, it doesn't wait on any input from me. It isn't going to try to like ask of, are you sure, or you want to do this? Like execute, it's as if that I just clicked the button and can't touch the computer anymore until it's done. So in this case, confirm doesn't matter. So you do that off. I wonder, maybe we could do that with invoke. There's a separate function called invoke that may allow input. Let me try that really quick. The important thing is all artists and programmers, we must be curious. All right. Okay, it didn't. Let's see. I'll try one more thing. All right, let's try this. There we go. There's the delete confirmation. Okay, so that's something to keep in mind, is if you're running an operator that requires further user input after clicking the button, this invoke default will be added. I hope this isn't mystifying add-ons more. I'll be going against the presentation. I wanted to make sure I went over this just because I think this curiosity and like testing things is an important part of being part of working on add-ons, is trying things, being curious, looking up documentation, for instance. For the invoke, so you want to learn more about invoke function. There we go. Invokes the operator. It's not clear on what execute and invoke does, the difference between them, but again, invoke is the function that's called when you press the big button. Execute runs if you don't provide an invoke. Execute is always what's used when you're running from like the command line, or if you have a script that's running Blender. This is what would be called if you run bpy.ops, or another add-on or operator is running my simple object operator, it would call on execute, not invoke. But this keyword here basically says call the invoke function for delete and not execute. So that way it can use this confirm. I know that's a lot. Maybe that's a lot for beginners, but I wanted to make sure that this could kind of be more thorough than just a here's the copy and paste happy story. You know, I wanted it to show the more of the specifics as well. So I hope that you find that useful. If you do, let me know in the comments. If it was confusing, I'll explain it again in the comments better. Let's go into building at least. I think it'll be too long and too thorough to get into testing. I do have a video on my YouTube channel that goes into the testing a little bit. So you can, if you're interested in like unit testing or automated testing for your add-ons, that video will have that. But I want to keep this to more of beginner specifics. So you're done with your add-on and you want to share it. So in this case, with a single file, you just send the Python file. That's it. You don't have to do anything else. The important thing with folders or multi-file add-ons is, firstly, the add-on has to be in a folder. So let's pick one of mine. So some people make the mistake of they'll select all their files like this. They would right-click the files and then you would zip them from here. The problem is when the user extracts those files afterward, there's no folder. You want the zip file to always have a folder. So in this case with the CLI helper, so in your zip file, you always want the top result in the zip file to just be a folder. You don't want anything else because you want to make sure that it installs correctly. And Blender always assumes it's a folder underneath the zip file. So always extract from the folder, you right-click the folder and zip it. Don't zip from the individual files. For the searching for answers, so there's whenever I do a Google search or whatever search engine you prefer, I always add bpy in quotes. So let's say if I just said add to collection Blender. So there is solutions for adding to collections, but this isn't specific to Blender Python necessarily. And so what I always do is add bpy in quotes, and there you go. The first result is adding to a collection. Look at that. So that's an important thing to keep in mind, is that if you're using the search engine, add like bpy in your search query, and that will help narrow down the results significantly to something Blender Python related. And again, I mentioned this earlier, but docs.blender.org. And then also, as I went to from that answer, blender.stackexchange.com. That's also an easy place to get answers. It's usually for like specific how to fix this problem type of questions. Okay, I think that's it. Again, I wanted to thank you for being part of this virtual workshop. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. Thank you. I appreciate being able to share this workshop with you and sharing my workflow and making add-ons, and happy blending.